I was born January the 15th, 1941 in Vincennes, Indiana. A terrible place to be born in because Vincennes is a very hard city for a second grader to spell. I had a lot of trouble with Vincennes. I grew up in Bowling Green, Kentucky. My father was a Coca-Cola bottling franchise owner, and he had most of Western Kentucky, so we bottled drinks, Coca-Cola and then Coke's other flavors. My mother stayed home until I was a seventh grader, and then she went back to her first love, which was teaching music in the county schools in Warren County, which is the county Bowling Green is in. I went to high school at a college prep schools called Western Kentucky College Training School. I went away to college at Agnes Scott in Decatur, Georgia, madly in love with a boy who was going either to Georgia Tech or Dartmouth, and my father was not very crazy about him, so it was a lovely family. But he said, wherever Philip goes, you're going to the opposite place. So I applied to Smith and Agnes Scott. Philip decided to go to Dartmouth, and I ended up at Agnes Scott. A women's college in the south, a women's college in the north. And as they say, that's made all the difference. I loved college. I loved Agnes Scott. I'm not somebody who wanted to be a lawyer from toddlerhood on. I wandered over to the law school. My life's been so serendipitous. I walked over to the law school and was standing in the lobby looking at the brochures. This was a Friday afternoon. And I guess it had to be in August because law school started the next Monday. And Dean Johnson, Ben Johnson, who was truly a visionary, came out. I didn't know who he was. So we chatted for a while, and he asked me where I'd gone to college and what my grades were, which I thought was a little intrusive. And he said, well, come in and talk to me. So he had what were then known as deans at MITS, and he had 10 of them. And that you had to meet no criteria whatsoever. I graduated. I practiced law in a very small firm that was integrated. We had a Jewish man. We had, I was the female. We had Maynard Jackson, who later became mayor of Atlanta, was in that firm. I did that until one of the senior partners, it was Ward, Moore, and Renskoff. Angela Davis was represented by Moore. Judge Ward, Henry, who was then there, became a judge in the firm, dissolved. That's when I went to Harvard for graduate school. I had decided that I wanted to teach, and I needed, as we said in those days, to wash my Emory degree. Yes, it was sort of like an awakening. I was not politically active in high school in my first 2 years in college, but then the voting registration drive was hot and heavy in Georgia beginning in around 1959. Kennedy came to Warm Springs, Georgia I was a rabid Kennedy fan. I registered voters in Augusta, and the sheriffs escorted us to the county line, and then the next county sheriff would escort us. Did I say rescue? It's a great Freudian slip. It was like a rescue. It was terrifying. I was at the last Klan rally on Stone Mountain the night before they integrated the Atlanta schools in 1960, the summer of 1961. I became friends with some of the black power structure. Julian Bond, who's now deceased, was a lovely, lovely man. He had a delegation he was trying to get seated at the Democratic Convention in 1968, and I agreed to be a delegate. We did not get seated, but we were there in the balcony in case the floor in case the vote was to seat us and unseat the rump, hand-picked Democrat group who were eventually seated. But I was there in the riots and trying to get through the park to get to my hotel, again terrified. My father called and said they thought they saw me on television when I please stay inside. So I didn't go out anymore. Those were heady times. And I think probably the chapter of my life in which I'm most proud was the years of screwing my courage to the wall and trying to be a part of something that I knew at the time was bigger than anything I'd ever had seen or perhaps would see again. As a Candler professor of law, I was the first woman to ever have a chair at Emory, which is staggering, and it does not speak well of Emory, because I was at that time maybe in my early 30s. My good friend and colleague Harold Marquis came in my office and he said, "Lucy," he said, "you know why you got this chair, don't you?" And I said, "Because I'm a woman." And he said, "That's right." And he said, "So what are you going to do about it?" And it carried a $5,000 stipend then, which is a lot of money. And I said, "I'm going to accept it." So even with those inklings, that being a woman was certainly a powerful factor. I was at the right place at the right time. It was the cresting of the women's movement. I was there. I was the only woman on the law faculty. I don't know about the other professional schools, but in any event, it was a wonderful, wonderful honor. I went to a Law and Humanities Conference in 1979, Law and Humanistic Education, which was this project created by the Ford Foundation to try to make law teaching more humane. And I thought that was a terrific idea and something I had struggled to do on my own, to be my own person in the classroom. And so at any rate, I went to this conference the first year, and then the second year they asked me to come back as a faculty member, and I met Jim Bowers, who was a faculty member from Texas Tech. We married and commuted for 2 years, and Jim laughingly said the truth, which was Braniff Airlines went out of business 2 weeks after we were finally reunited in Atlanta and received the offer to come to LSU.
Take it away.
Austin Johnson, who was a former colleague of ours here, now gone into private practice. Austin came to me and said, the juvenile judges need a bench book. We got these laws scattered over 78 titles. Nobody is real sure of what, and some of them are inconsistent. Can you pull it all together in a bench book? And I said, "Austin, I did children in juvenile law when I was in Atlanta. I'm not doing that again. They are a beleaguered group. Always the lowest people on the totem pole are the juvenile judges in the courts." And I said, "No, I'm going to do something like securities or some, tonier area of the law." He said, "Well, just do this because you know juvenile law. I know that. Just do this one project and then you can decamp." We finally got all the laws together, but we used a system of caveats. We'd say, caveat, the law says 1, 2, 3 here. The law over here says 4, 5, 6, and not 1 or 2. So just to make the judges aware of the fact that there were incredible incongruities, that created the momentum to institute a children's code committee to bring all the laws together in a comprehensive code. We got a little bit of money from the Department of Family and Children's Services. Bill Hawkwood gave money for the group to come together. So We worked on it for 5 years and produced this 1,100-page document called the Children's Code. And the legislature, miracle of miracles, enacted it. The very first, we were so naive, enacted it the very first year it was introduced. We had powerful senators who believed in what we were doing. And we said, you know, this is not revolutionary. What we're doing is pulling together and reconciling the existing law. So it didn't sound very threatening, but anybody who's ever taken minutes for an organization or drafted an agreement based upon negotiations in court, never give up the power to write the agreement. So we'd come to points we'd come to forks in the road, and we always took what we thought was the pro-children road. So the legislature, we weren't dissembling. We said this is mainly, you know, existing law. And they enacted it, and then the Law Institute took the Children's Code Committee in as a standing committee. And well, I did the evaluation. I did the site inspection of this sleepy little law school in Western Virginia called Appalachian Law School, and I fell in love with the model. And it's just it was back to my social worker days. They took mostly kids from the mountains and kids whose parents had not gone to college, or there's kids who were the first college graduates in their entire family line, and offered them a legal education. They were small, rural, no distractions. I just fell in love with them. I did an honest evaluation, but I didn't forget the school. So we had a sabbatical coming up, and we'd already spent several lovely sabbaticals abroad. I mean, really, really had an enriched professional life. And I called them and I said, no, I wrote a letter and I said, we both got a sabbatical. Do you by chance have any openings on your faculty? And we'll work at a reduced rate. Jim and I had already worked it out. We wanted to go badly enough that we'd go for less. And our youngest son was in college, so we were free to roam. And they called back the next week and said, we don't have openings for faculty. We have one opening, but we do have an opening for a dean. Would you be interested in being dean? And I said, I don't think so, but we'll talk about it. So I went through the first interview, and the people were really terrific. The board of trustees. So I interviewed them, and I said to Jim, you're going to love this campus, and these are really nice people. Let's just go talk to them. So we went. Anyway, to make a long story very short, we agreed to go, and it was an entirely different lifestyle. I thought I could do it. I thought I had the necessary skills, and I certainly shared the vision. The biggest problem was that Jim had been diagnosed with cancer before we went. So it was really his decision whether or not he was willing to be farther away from medical care, because the nearest airport is 2 hours away from Grundy, which is where the law school was. But we did go, and about that time, after my first year, law school enrollment started declining, so it made the school much, much more vulnerable. So I spent most of my time trying to put together a marriage between Appalachian Law School and Emory and Henry, which is a very prestigious college that's also in that same neck of the woods. Almost pulled it off for reasons much too complicated to go into here. And then Jim died. And so I decided to come back home and unretire. I had retired from LSU, so I retired as the dean. I'm working on my third retirement, return to work. Children appear as witnesses in all sorts of forms, not just the juvenile court, but in child custody cases, in visitation cases. Sometimes they're the only ones that see a car accident. So it's important to know whether we can count on what they say or not. So I spent 5 years writing this book. I submitted parts, an early form of it, to law reviews, and this wonderful guy who became a friend at Northwestern, Vic Rosenblum, he said, you don't have a law review article. You've got a book. So that spurred me on to turn into a book, and Yale published it, and it was the runner-up for the Scribes Award one year. That's the organization of law professors that pick out the best book written every year. We had a blended family. I was teaching family law and talking about blended families. I tell my class I'm working through all of the issues in family law because my oldest daughter is adopted. Not Fairchild, Leah, my second oldest daughter. We had a blended family, and it was a wonderful experience. And then we had Ben, the seventh child. Jim and I produced unexpectedly our own trailer child, and we lived in this huge, what was to me still now rambling house out in Riverbend before it became populated. So we lost the animals, and we got a lot of people instead. We had we've always had dachshunds. I now have 4 still in my little condominium. At one time, that's the most we've ever had. We had a great life. It's been a great ride.